friends, welcome to Thursday. When we left off, the Jed and TT had made a new friend, an orphan squirrel named. Remember, I have a hard time with these names. Chi, I think. And they were trying to catch up with Chai. They know Chai is ahead of them on their way home, but they've stopped because there's a big hailstorm. So they're waiting out the storm, and then they're going to keep going. We're going to start to chapter 17. Bobcats happen. Afternoon darkened into evening. The air grew colder. It grew mean and spiteful, gathering its forces and hurling drops, slushy flakes, and icy pellets at Chai. He turned his back to the winds and rubbed his face. Night was falling. He could not keep going, especially in this weather. He was tired. He was cranky. He was forgetting to be careful. He made his way to the ground in the way that you might make your way from the living room to your bedroom. He dragged leaves and bits of brush into a hazy heap, the way you might arrange the covers you left in such a mess this morning. This is fine for you. There are probably no bobcats lurking in the bathroom, waiting to pounce as you pass by. The bobcat may have been tired and cranky too. Maybe that's why he carelessly snapped a twig as he moved closer to the tasty snack that had come into view. The tasty snack? The squirrels. The squirrel, Chai. Chai's fur stood on end. He sniffed the air. He felt the presence of a big cat. Fear gave him one last burst of energy, and he took off, his paw barely meeting the ground. Aware of nothing but the need to hide, he frantically scanned the murkiness ahead. Was that a crevice? It was. Hallelujah! He went in. It was narrow, not too deep, but deep enough. Deeper than the length of a bobcat's arm. He flattened his back against the wall and pulled in his gut. Almost immediately, the bobcat claws reached in, exploring. Chai felt the pointy tips graze his fur hairs, but he did not move. He did not breathe. He did not make one sound. The bobcat withdrew his paw and sniffed at the opening of the crevice. Satisfied that the snack was still in there, the bobcat lay down. The fact that the crevice was in the entry to a small cave was a piece of good luck for him. Sheltered from the storm, he settled in. There was a little empty place in his stomach that he wouldn't mind filling, but he wasn't in a hurry. He could wait. His eyes sucked in the last shreds of light the stormy evening had to offer and reflected them back out into the darkness. They appeared to Chai as faint yellow spheres within the large black bobcat shape. It was hard for him to separate the bobcat from the general darkness, except that the cat was darker and closer and warmer. He could smell its scent, so Chai's in this little crack, and the bobcat is just waiting for him. He could feel its warm breath waft over him in waves when the bobcat exhaled. It was an odd feeling to be somewhat grateful for the warmth that his bone-chilling night, knowing all the while that if he emerged even slightly from his crevice, the warmth would envelop him, and he would become even warmer in a moist, painful, fatal way. The thought gave him pause. Or rather, pause. Ha ha. He smiled weakly at his little joke. The situation was not funny, though. In the chill between bobcat breaths, Chai shuddered. He looked out at the yellow eyes and the black shape. He felt the warm breath. He was hungrier than the bobcat was. He was on the verge of fainting from hunger. Mixed with terror, after a time he slumped, not so much falling asleep as collapsing. It was as if his body said, "If this is the end, I'd rather not know about it." Still pressed against the wall, the bottom parts of him slid out away from it, just a little, within reach of the bobcat, although he wasn't paying attention just then. Chapter 18. Something was different. For hours the storm blustered and banged outside the tree where Titi, Jed, and Chi slept. The very same storm slammed and rollicked around the cave where Chai had collapsed in the cold crevice. It howled, pelted, whirled, and whined. It spit and spade. It showered. Its winds were fierce. Its wetness was inescapable. Every living thing caught out in the icy fury curled in on itself, shivered, shriveled, shrank. And then, while everyone's eyes were squeezed shut, the storm rattled and whimpered and spun its way to somewhere else. The air stilled, the stars emerged. In the crevice, Chai opened his eyes and blinked. He sensed that something was different. Something had changed. He realized that the bottom of him had slid within reach of the bobcat's claws. Stealthily, moving one paw at a time, he worked his way up to a standing position. The rock wall behind him was wicked cold, not the sort of thing you want to nestle up to given the choice, but nestle up he did. By the time he was on his feet again, his eyes had adjusted to the darkness, and Chai noticed two things. One was that the darkness wasn't so dark, and the form of the bobcat was edged in the moonlight. He could make out easily the peaceful rising and falling of the bobcat's furry ribs. Also, the noise of the storm had subsided. He could still hear the sound of moving air, but now the air was moving in and out of the bobcat's nose. The bobcat was snoring, which meant the bobcat was asleep. Since bobcats are creatures who hunt by night, he knew the bobcat was just napping, so it might be now, it might be never. Chai saw that. Still, to run toward the mouth and claws of a bobcat went against everything that was in him. He moved closer, paused, listened. Should he go on? He waited for the next door, and waited, and waited. Chai glanced back to see how far he had come from the relative safety of the wall. As he did, the snore came, a loud, ripping one, and he jumped. There was a halt in the middle of the snore, and he froze. Then the rest of the snore, a soft, trailing wheeze. Fear left him. He stepped out of the crevice, and he padded right into the sleeping beast and stood up. He looked over it. He had never seen one this close. He thumbed his nose at the bobcat. He put his thumbs up to his ears and wiggled his fingers. He turned, so he went like this at the bobcat. He turned his back and lifted his tail at the animal, mooning in the moonlight. Then he stepped away softly toward the nearest tree and scurried away, not because he was afraid, but because he was not a fool. Bobcats, of course, climbed trees too. They're excellent climbers, but sleeping bobcats don't. This bobcat was only napping, and momentarily he opened his eyes and blinked. He sensed that something was different. Something had changed. Chapter 19. Getting Squirrely. Jed woke up first. He padded stiffly over to the knothole to see what was up. He said softly. Well, fewer leaves were up in the trees, and a whole lot more were down on the ground, that was for sure. But the wintry storm had passed. It was an autumn beauty of a day, mild and sparkling. Denizens of the forest ventured from the nook, burrow, and crevice. Birds sang. Jed called over his shoulder to Chi-Chi and Chi. He went and nudged them until they opened their eyes. Let's go, he said. The three of them crawled out of the hollow and hurried on their way. Half a mile back, the humans crawled out from their pickup truck. They breathed in the fresh air. They stretched and chattered and looked over things. Then they started up the racket. The friends traveled faster at the sound of it. No time for stories today. They stopped at intervals to try and warn local residents about the disaster coming their way, but the story was too wild. No one had ever heard of such a thing. Don't we have enough things to worry about, said a chipmunk. Why do you have to make up new things? I'm just glad the storm's over, said a hairy woodpecker. I'm going to enjoy this beautiful day. It has to have a happy ending, said a squirrel. The happy ending is if you get out of the way, said Titi. You have to move. How is that a happy ending, said the squirrel. It's like talking to rocks, said Jed. I know, said Titi. I think rocks might actually listen. It's still good to spread the word, said Chi. That way, when creatures hear the rumbling for themselves, they'll know what's going on. They'll have a better chance. By mid-morning, they reached the outskirts of the grove. Home. The branches no longer crisscrossed the bud's paths in random, unpredictable ways, but in patterns Jed and Titi knew by heart. Here were the fragrant popple paths and the welcoming arms of the oaks. Here was the southbound limb of the ancient beech. Up ahead of them, familiar voices scolded and squeaked. From behind came the rumbling. That was familiar now, too. Faint and muffled, but ominous as it rose and fell. The three of them stood on the ancient beech limb and looked ahead. They looked behind. They looked at one another. So what do we do now, said Titi. Do we have a plan? Maybe the squirrels who know us will believe us, said Jed, but I'm not counting on it. Chi thought about this. Do we need them to believe us, she asked. Or do we just want them to move? We want them to move, said Jed, away from the buzz paths. We want to keep everyone safe and together and not afraid. Well, where can we all even go, asked Titi. There's quite a lot of us. Chi spoke again. I think that wherever we go, we'll be more welcome if we show up with plenty of nuts. I think we have to convince everyone to move their nuts. Right, said Jed. Easy peasy. That's only the start of the idea, admitted Chi. But let's all think about it for a minute. Surely we can figure out something. So they tried, each in their own way, to find an answer to the riddle. It did not seem like an opportunity for high tree, thought Jed. Maybe math would help. How much time would it take to find and move all the nuts he himself had buried so far? Was that a different number from the amount of time left before the disaster arrived? How much time would be left after that, before winter, to find more nuts? These numbers didn't calm him down. They made his head spin. Titi thought about how hard it was to get squirrels to do anything, although Jip, of all squirrels, had gotten everyone to run up trees by crying, "Wolf!" What could you yell, she wondered, to get squirrels to run all together to one place without getting scattered every which way? How could you herd them? Why were squirrels so ornery? Why weren't they more like ants, or even bees? She folded her arms and paced. It was nice to have friends. She felt good to have an idea about moving the nuts. She would very much like to have another idea. She tried to remember how she had done it. It seemed like her idea had just come out of nowhere, like a lightning bug lighting up the inside of her mind. A leaf drifted past it as it fell to earth. The pattern of light and shadow shifted. Jed had been on a shady spot, but when he felt the top of his head being warmed by sunlight, he realized that valuable minutes were slipping away. "And has anyone thought of anything yet?" he asked. "No," said she ruefully. "Not really," said Titi. "Me either," said Jed. "If only Chai were here," said Titi. "Why?" asked a voice from up ahead. "What could he do?" All three of them looked. A tall, handsome squirrel adjusted his foray, then dropped down neatly to their level. Jed and Titi's mouths fell open. Their eyes registered astonishment for about 1 microsecond before shifting on to joy. Then there were shouts. Then there was hugging. Then there was more shouts. Then there was more hugging. She stood apart watching. It was okay. She didn't mind. She was new here. But Chai saw her there, and he reached out to Jed and offered Chi his paw. "My name's Chai," he said. "And you are?" "Chi," she said. Not Chi, she said, "but my friends call me Chi." "Chi," repeated Chai. "We met yesterday, briefly, but I didn't catch your name. Very pleased to meet you again. It was a good idea you had about the nuts." "Wait a minute," said Titi. "How long have you been listening to us up there?" "Oh, not that long," said Chai. "I wanted to have a brilliant idea before I jumped down, but I don't. I know what you mean about no one listening, but I'm not sure I would listen either if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. It is not in squirrel nature." "Squirrel nature," said Jed, repeating Chai's words. "What is squirrel nature? I guess we like games. We like stories. How do you get squirrels to be serious?" Tomorrow we will find out if they can get the squirrels to be serious and run.